Hi, Dan Albaum here. Thanks for coming to check out Market Impact Insights. Over the past several weeks, I've been hearing from so many readers of my new book, The Giving Edge, how it's really touching them and motivating them to make a commitment to bring a giving mindset every day. And you can experience that too through the stories of 37 remarkable humans who share how they discovered that making that commitment to bringing a giving mindset every day has given them exponential returns in business and life. It's available wherever you find books. Go check it out and let me know what you think. Now on to this week's podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. We all experience in life, sometimes we're in a routine, we've got some rhythm. Maybe we're building out a real resume and a career that's filled with special moments, and we're just locked in. But yet we can reach a point, even with all that success and the impact that we're making, there's a point where it may behoove us to really make a transition, to think about doing something entirely different, coming at it with a whole new perspective. So we're talking about life and career transition and changes, and how do we drive perhaps even more leadership impact by having the courage to make that transition. We're going to get into that today with Tim Bounds. And Tim is the founder of the Unison Company, an organizational consultancy. He's an executive coach for businesses and executive leaders, but he's also a ministry veteran of 25 years. And for 18 years as a teaching pastor and executive leader at The Crossing. And that was a large multi-campus, non-denominational church of national recognition and international reach. And so he established himself very much there, but he's made this transition now into his own company, and he's helping others become better leaders. He's spoken to audiences ranging from 12,000 all the way down to 20, and he's all about connection. I know in being introduced to him through a former colleague of mine, he brings a passion and an energy around servant leadership that really resonates with me and of course, the spirit of this podcast. So it's perfect timing to have this conversation. Tim, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Oh, Dan, thanks so much. It's just a privilege to get to be here with you.
So, Tim, you've had this interesting journey, and I want to go back and really have you talk about what sparked your decision to make this transition from ministry leadership to your current practice, which is focused largely around servant leadership and marketing strategy, just helping businesses and leaders succeed. What really drove that?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm not the first person in history to get to the kind of the second half of your career and look at things and go, is it time for a change? But that journey always, you always arrive at it in different ways. So for me, I had a friend say it this way, and I thought it was the best way to articulate how I felt, which is that you get to a point in your career where what used to be easy now feels hard. And I was at that place. I started to look at the work I was doing. I started to look at the impact I was having, and also, looking forward at the next, 20 or so years of working career life that I feel like I have ahead of me. And I started to think, have I hit a lid? Is there more that I have to offer people? And so I started thinking about it. Lots of difficult conversations with close advisors, friends of mine who I trust. My wife, Kim, and I were talking about it. And I if I could just make a quick digression into the theology, which is my background, is, I got to a point where I said, if this is going to make sense to me, a transition like this, it has to make sense to me theologically. I have to understand where God is in a decision like this. And what it came down to is I absolutely have always believed that God cares about every aspect of our lives, that He cares about the kingdom of God, which is all encompassing. It's everything. And so if I could find myself in an opportunity where I could help leaders, business leaders who care deeply about their mission and what they're doing, and they care deeply about their people who are helping them do it, if they were oriented towards human flourishing, then I could help be a part of growing and strengthening some of those organizations, helping people thrive. And that felt very, I guess, germane to the work that I've been doing my whole life. And I saw a real opportunity there to take some of my strengths as a speaker, communicator, team, manager, experience in executive leadership, and apply that towards businesses that were trying to do really good work in the world. So here I am.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because a lot of times when we're really struggling maybe with that decision to take on or go in a whole different path, it's
Yeah.
not about leaving behind a lot of the things that really enabled you to be successful in a former
Mhm.
role. I mean, even if the context is different going forward, there's still going to be a lot of transferable skills, and your learning and experience is going to carry over. So it's not
Yeah.
an abandonment, if you will, of what you've done, but it's really embracing. Let's try something new. Let's take on a
Yeah.
new challenge. And speaking of that, so when you do reflect on your journey, what has been some of your biggest learning, and have there been surprises for you along the way?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Too many to recount here in this conversation, but to your point, you get to these kinds of places in your career, and it's not a hard left turn. It's how do I take the lessons that I have learned over the years and apply it to what is next. And I think the biggest learning for me, and the thing that's surprised me, is just what I would kind of call the myths of leadership culture. It's interesting to me that we've, as a culture, we've explored leadership for the last 50, 60, 70 years. If you go back to really where leadership books started to show up in our bookstores, and organizations started to really talk about this. And there's been a lot of conversation over the decades about good leadership and what that looks like. I don't know that it's yielded the results that we would hope for with a deep exploration of that. But what I've learned about it is that character development matters way more than some of the other things we think about when we think about good leadership. Character is everything, because what surprised me is leadership actually gets more painful as your organization grows. And I don't think people are always prepared. There's always the benefits of leadership, the things that we will enjoy, the successes we will reap, all of that. But I think the pain often catches people off guard. But as you continue to grow in an organization in leadership, what you experience is grief when people that you love leave the organization, when there's failure, when things don't go well, when a big initiative doesn't succeed. And then also it can lead to a kind of isolation where big leaders will start to isolate themselves to protect. I think it's an act of self-protection. And so, when I think about really effective leaders and what it really takes in the world that we're in today, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and having a really strong support system who can help you focus on yourself, the character, the person that you are on the inside and out, is just one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, and you've probably seen this with a lot of the leaders that you've worked with, which is it's so easy to take on this veil of perfection. We want as a leader to say, well, I can't be vulnerable. I can't show that I've got the same human imperfections that my team has. And so we
Right.
mistakenly, try to have this optics of perfection. And that is not usually a formula for success, because I think it builds a little skepticism. I think you're more relatable when you can bring that veil down and say, you know what, I've failed just like all of you, and I've had some painful lessons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate to work in organizations where I saw it modeled the other way. I saw leaders who were vulnerable and who modeled that for me. And I'm grateful for that. At the same time, yeah, there's a tension there. You want to be vulnerable. You want to show people that you're not perfect and that perfection is not what you're striving for. At the same time, I think leaders feel this pressure. Who can I be safe with? And it's not everybody. You really need to surround yourself with some trusted people who are able to help you. Be that kind of vulnerable in those contexts. And so it's a tension there, but yes, I think it's so important.
And you've worked with a lot of small and medium sized businesses, and we're in some really interesting times right now, and in many ways, unprecedented times. What are some of the biggest challenges that those businesses are facing right now?
Great question. The way you just kind of framed it there, the first thing I would say is, every small business is looking at scaling. How do we grow? How do we build so that we can, go after charge the next hill, go after the next objective, continue to grow our market, our business, our revenue, all of that. What I find is that oftentimes we immediately go to the system or the strategy. How do we get the word out there more? How do we or how are we able to churn out more widgets or build out the system so that we can do this? But the building of the organization is just as important. You want to make sure that your people, the people who are getting the work done, that is scaling at a rate also, and that allows you to grow. And I think that's where I see some of the challenges. It's the founder who is really passionate about the business, but maybe has gotten to a point where they're owning too much and they need help letting some of those things go. It's the organization that has HR issues, but they're not big enough yet to have an HR department. And so these kind of personnel issues come up and no one's quite sure what to do with them. They've got an org chart that was perfect to get them from stage 1 to stage 3, but now moving into stage 4 and 5 of the business, they can get stuck. And so, and then on top of all of that, Dan, I think the biggest challenge is as it grows and more people get involved, the important conversations stop happening. We've all got our heads down. We're trying to get things done. There's a little bit of more distance now between me and the leader. I have some things I need to communicate to him. I'm not sure if they're willing to receive it. And so the biggest danger is that trust begins to erode in the organization as it grows. And that's a huge challenge for I think every organization, but particularly the ones who are oriented towards growth.
Yeah. And in the hundreds of conversations I've had on Market Impact Insights so far, what company founders and senior leaders have told me is one of the hardest things they ever have to do is building and sustaining a healthy culture. What do you think are keys for being able to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, and I totally agree. What's the old saying is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so you can have the best possible strategy, but if you haven't figured out how to sustain that culture and keep it healthy, it makes things really challenging. So the foundation in my mind for a healthy culture is trust. And it's not just a trust like I trust that you'll do what you say you're going to do. I think that's important, but it's I trust you as a person. I trust that you'll tell me the truth. That when I ask you for feedback, that you'll give me kind but honest feedback. That when you say, you care about my family or about the work we're doing or about an initiative that I'm responsible for or something, that you mean it when you say you care. That when we have a disagreement or a bump or a conflict, that we will both be committed to working through it together and we'll still be together on the other side of it. A really quick aside story, Dan, if I love telling stories. So just a quick one. One of my coworkers years ago, he and I got into a pretty heavy disagreement about something, and I was in the wrong. I think not necessarily in the wrong about the content of the discussion, but the way I handled it. I kind of lost my cool. I really got angry with him. Let him know it. What's worse is we were actually out hanging out with our families, and so I did it in front of our wives and a couple of our kids, and so it was just a kind of a messy situation. And I really felt awful about it. I was embarrassed. I felt like I had eroded trust and I needed to make that right. So I called him the next day and just started with, "Hey, listen, I'm so sorry and not happy about the way I acted yesterday. And I still have some strong feelings about what we were disagreeing about, but I really wish we could talk about this some more. And I hope you'll forgive me. And his response to me, Dan, is something I'll never forget and something that we could easily take for granted. But he said, what kind of a friend would I be if we if we can't get into a conflict like that and still be friends on the other side of it? And I think that's profound. I think that that's so important in relationships, and that's what trust can do. Is we can build it to a place where we say, even when we go through difficult times, we're committed to prevailing on the other side of it. And if we can enter into our work with that kind of an attitude towards the team and the work that we're doing, I think then culture is something that can be maintained. It's strengthened when you build that kind of trust. And if you're not doing that, if you're not trying to establish that at a primary level, Stephen Covey Jr. writes about this, Patrick Lencioni. If you're not preserving that culture, there's a cost over time to the churn that you experience when people leave because they're frustrated, or blow ups take longer to resolve. When hard things aren't said out loud because we're afraid of how people respond. All those kinds of things.
Yeah, and that's something that we see so often when companies merge, come together, or maybe it's an outright acquisition.
Yeah.
There's that tenuous line of you've got multiple or different cultures coming together, and which one is going to, through that synthesis, is going to emerge. And there can be a lot of disruption there. And of course, building authentic, trusted relationships, fostering collaboration across groups, all of those are so critical as an effective leader. Are there some pitfalls you see leaders can fall into? How should we be thinking about, back to the relationship and collaboration piece? How do we make sure that all comes together in the right way?
Yeah, I just think we have to prioritize it, and sometimes we don't. And this is the messy human side of the businesses that we do, and it often requires us to slow down a little bit. And I know that a lot of people, especially leaders of organizations, founders, the last thing they want to do is have to slow down when they've got objectives and goals they're trying to reach and deadlines and all of that kind of stuff. But really, we really have to take the time to process that trust building. So when you use the example of two organizations merging together, that's a huge transition. Both organizations had a way that they were doing things before, and now that they've come together, they're simply going to have to do things a different way moving forward. And the reality is that a lot of times the leader might know what that new way looks like, but everyone else in the organization doesn't. It takes some time to let go of, well, I always did it this way, or I'm familiar with doing it this way, or I invented this way of doing it, and now you want me to let that go. It can be hard to let that go. But if I'm the leader, I'm going to slow that process down, and nothing builds trust like just simply listening and saying to people, how are you feeling about this? What do you feel like you need? I know we're not going to do it that way anymore. How do you feel about that? How can I help you as we kind of move forward? And that's I think that's just essential to being able to move forward. There's an author who I'm a fan of. His name is Edwin Friedman, wrote a book back in the 90s called A Failure of Nerve. Now, Friedman was a student of the guy who developed family systems therapy. So he was in the therapeutic psychological world. And when you hear terms like differentiation and triangulation and enmeshment, if you've ever heard people use those words before, they were all born out of family systems therapy. Well, Edwin Friedman took the principles from that and said, I think this applies in business leadership as well. And ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to acknowledge the tension that necessarily exists in any productive relationship. I mean, every relationship we're in has tension. And what that means is that sometimes we're going to have to do things my way. Sometimes we're going to have to do things your way. And if we're going to maintain a healthy relationship, then we actually have to kind of honor both poles of that relationship, both sides of it. And so When those tensions get out of balance, that's where triangulation occurs. Two people ally themselves against another person. They get enmeshed. Two people are too close to each other to the point to where one of them sort of disappears into the other. That is where those are the kinds of things where trust erodes. And in big transitions and big growth strategies and those kinds of things, this is where businesses are most in danger of those kinds of things happening. And so yeah, the way through that is really good, healthy listening, processing emotions, and then helping people get to the other side of that so that we can move forward together.
Yeah, there was a phrase that developed in an organization that I used to work in, and it was called disagree and commit. And the idea was that there's inevitably going to be different perspectives. There's going to be what we call conflict, and conflict can be really constructive.
Yeah,
But the important thing of respecting the process to say, at the end of the day, we're each going to be able to maybe have some input. Someone's going to own the decision. That's probably going to be defined in an organization. Decision may not go my way, but I will respect that decision and I'll commit to supporting it. Where we
that's
go
great.
sideways is when we don't follow through on that commit piece, right? So that's
Yeah.
the subtlety that can kind of jam us up a little bit inside organizations, right?
I mean, absolutely, Dan. And I think that behind that is this idea of trust. That if I disagree with you, if you're my leader and I disagree with you, but in order to move forward, I have to commit to your decision, even if it wasn't exactly where I would take things. That just becomes so much more natural to me, and I can get so much more excited about that, even if I disagree. If I trust you, if I know that you're going to follow through on your end, if I know that you trust me, that our relationship is healthy, and that if things don't work out on the other side, there's no I told you so. It's simply let's adjust and keep moving forward together. Again, yeah, that's just why I think that idea of trusting each other is so foundational.
What else do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
Well, for me, again, I said this earlier, but it just comes down to the word character. Um, Period. It's character. If your goal in business is to build the biggest business ever and to make the most money ever, and those are the values that drive you, honestly, at some point you'll hit a lid. Or you'll be wildly successful, but your business that you've created will be a nightmare. You will leave a wake of bodies behind you, and there will be so much fallout or consequences from poor leadership that it becomes a problem. The only antidote to that is when a leader prioritizes their own character development. And so I always tell people, make your life meaningful. Care about the work that you're doing. Put your family first. I think that's incredibly important. And then put your employees second. Value the people who serve you and then serve them back. When they win, you win. And when the team wins, then you get an opportunity to celebrate that. And it makes a difference in everyone's lives. But all of that is born out of someone who has developed their own character, a kind of humility that it doesn't have to be all about them, that they can celebrate when other people win. And they're committed to building something that matters to the people who are in it. Along with that, I'd say, confront your mistakes, own your failures, confess your sins, as it were. If you've got a struggle that's personal and it jeopardizes your team or your family, or it has the potential to do that, don't wait to get help. Don't do this alone. Don't isolate. I think exceptional leadership is when somebody can get to the end of their story and say, man, I made people's lives better. I'm so grateful for this ride that I've been on with these people who matter to me so much. And I can still look these people in the eye and we can celebrate with tears in our eyes what happened and how successful we're because we did it together. And what a ride. So to go back to just getting a little spiritual on all of us, like I did at the beginning, I just think God cares about all of that. He wants us to live flourishing, meaningful lives that are rich in really strong, powerful relationships.
You mentioned character. And so back to this aspect of putting
Yeah.
ourselves out there and taking on new challenges and exposing ourselves to new perspectives and different life experiences, all of that stuff. That's character building, isn't it? I mean, as opposed to just staying in our comfortable cocoon of, yeah, everything's good. And, I wake up every day and I just kind of know. But even if it might be a little bit daunting or disruptive, there could be character building that comes through that. Don't you think?
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, I think as I'm in this kind of career transition in some ways still, I'm learning this in real time, Dan. There are so many different perspectives out there and tons of books and resources that'll tell you this is what you should do. This is what it looks like to build a successful business. This is what good leadership looks like. All of those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you still have to decide what you're going to do. And the only way I've figured out how to do that is to dig down deep inside of me and say, well, what do I want? What do I want this to look like? What matters to me the most? And that is as much character building as anything else I've experienced in all of this.
Self-reflection is what I was just writing down as you were
Mm.
speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's committing to that. And what comes from that, there's kind of a genuine confidence that comes when we've truly taken the time to self-reflect.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, it's the slowing down. I mean, you got to slow down in order to do that. But I know some great leaders, and I've tried to apply this in my own life, who sit down every morning and spend some time reflecting, whether that's meditation or prayer or journaling, but some form in the mornings of just taking stock of where am I today, who am I today, and where do I want to go from here. So yeah, it's great.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
It actually it connects to what we were just talking about. I had a business leader who was retired and was so kind to meet with me and not only offer me his wisdom, but also offer me some of his resources that he had developed. He just said very simply, build the business that you want to work in. And I think that's profound. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the work that I'm doing needs to matter to me. It needs to be something that I enjoy and that reflects who I am in the world. And so, again, with all of these different resources and people giving advice and voices out there that are speaking about leadership and all of that stuff, I need to decide what works best for me. And so, the way I took that is I need to make sure that all of the work I'm doing is deeply rooted in my own identity and who I am. And then everything then radiates out from there.
Yeah, it's really having that clear vision that everyone else can really understand and buy into and aspire towards what that vision is. It feels like
Yeah.
that's like the power, the propulsion of the organization going forward over time.
Yeah. And you can't ask other people to buy into a vision that you haven't bought into yourself. Right. So it's got to be something that is coming from deep inside of you and saying, this is how I see the world. And this is how I want to be an agent of change in that world. And so this is the target. This is what we're going to go for. But it's born out of who I am.
When you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
I heard, I said this to a friend, and then I heard somebody say it in a TED Talk, and so I probably am about to trip over somebody else's trademarked phrase. But the future of business is human, and that makes me excited. You cannot read anything in the business world right now that doesn't talk about AI and the way it's going to change everything. And I'm no expert on AI by any stretch. I have no business treading into those waters. But I will just say, I don't believe the hype about AI when it comes to this idea that we'll all lose our jobs and there will be some, universal basic income or something like that. Because fundamentally, I believe people were made for meaning and purpose. And we draw a lot of that meaning and purpose from the work that we do in this world and the work that we do together. And so I would even go so far as to say we were made for work. And so we're always going to find ways to stay busy, always going to find ways to make the world a better place, always find ways to benefit one another, to benefit customers, employees, family, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that the cutting edge is actually going to be, once the dust kind of settles on some of this stuff, which but who knows when that's going to be. But I think the businesses that thrive, the businesses that succeed, are going to be the ones who have either maintained or relearned those soft human skills of how we interrelate with one another, how we understand whether it's our customer or our employee or our client. Those human skills are going to be just as important as anything moving forward, and that makes me excited because I think we're honestly happier when we're working with other human beings and collaborating together. So yeah, I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah, and that's a huge point because with AI, the ultimate leveling of the playing field is these tools are available to so many more people
Mm-hmm.
and you can do so much more with it. And yes, the possibilities around productivity and what you can actually do with it, it's extending, but at the same time, there's this degree of sameness that's increasing, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody has access to the same tools that we might actually see just through the technology itself, the AI, that it's more everything is kind of looking more the same. And so the
Uh-huh.
differentiator back to what you're saying, it's human judgment, it's the human factor that's going to tip the scales in favor over the long haul to those that embrace the humanness that is still very critical and important. And AI should just be a tool, not a replacement for that humanness. That's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Dan. And, Marshall McLuhan was an old futurist, I think, from the 60s, and he said some really interesting things about technology and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the things he said is every time that you introduce a new piece of technology, there's a way in which things move forward, and then there's also a way in which things digress, they move back. And that's not always a negative thing. I think there's going to be a return to some of the really beautiful stuff that was happening in the business world before the dot-com boom, back when a lot of businesses were much more family oriented, a lot more relational. I think of like the old stories about like you knew your insurance agent by name, you had his number, you knew how to get a hold of them when you had an emergency, and like those kinds of things. Like I think that there will be a return to some of that stuff, and I mean, who doesn't want more of that? I think it's exciting.
So, do you have any other final advice for leaders to create a more positive impact and elevate the performance of their teams?
Um, you know, I, I worked in an environment for 25 years where you you could not incentivize your employees, or even more so your volunteers, by an org chart or by compensation. And so we had to learn ways of incentivizing people that were more altruistic, or were more deeply centered around their heart, what they were passionate about, what they cared about, what mattered to them, those kinds of things. And I think in the business world, we lose sight of the fact that some of those things can be really powerful motivators outside of just the org chart and the finances. And so, yeah, my advice would be to anybody who's leading an organization is learn how to harness some of that for the good of what you're trying to accomplish. Make building trust and strengthening culture and building up your people an essential part of your business. Oftentimes, the ROI on those kinds of things can be harder to measure. It doesn't compute on paper quite the same way other areas of focus do. But it's there. It's there. I think actually in very tangible terms, often, especially over the long haul, because this is what sustains organizations for a longer period of time, and people hang in there and they start to learn more about the business, and they do it really well over the years. And then there's other benefits as well. It just ends up being a better place to work. People like doing business with you. People like working in your organization. And at the end, I just think it's so important over the years you create these memories and these experiences with the people that you're doing business with, and those are the stories you tell in the final season of your life, and you reminisce about all the amazing things you got to do together and who you got to do it with. That is in maybe a more intangible return on investment, but boy, I think it matters a lot. And so my advice would be bring in people to help you do this. It's the work I'm trying to do with organizations, but there's a lot of people out there who are doing great work with this. And you've already, if you're a leader, if you're a founder or a CEO or an executive leader, you already have a lot on your plate, and your talents might be more in some other area of expertise. That's where you bring somebody in to help you with it, and let that be a part of your organization, because your people will appreciate it.
And that's a wrap. Tim, thanks again for joining and sharing your journey of transitioning from ministry leadership into now coaching business leaders and business owners create lasting impact out in the marketplace. It was inspiring. Thanks again for joining.
Oh, Dan, thanks again to you. And I just appreciate the conversation. It was great.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.